Clorinda, 23 years old, never imagined the most bitter confrontation of her life would happen in the polished glass office of her own beauty empire, an empire I had built from nothing. Not from hard work and love. No. From abandonment. From bitterness. From sleeping in shelters and grinding through every night shift I could get my hands on. From the deep, cold silence that wrapped around me every time I remembered I had no one, not because they died, but because they chose to walk away from me. All because of a 3% discrepancy in a DNA test. I was only a baby when it happened. Those two people, claimed to be my biological parents. But according to what I had been told in the orphanage, they had me tested, and the DNA test came back showing I was 97% a match. They expected 100. They expected perfection. So they abandoned me. They did not leave me with relatives. They did not try to double-check. They did not fight for me. They dropped me off like expired milk and walked out of that orphanage with clean hands and cold hearts, convinced I was not theirs because I was off by 3%. I do not remember their faces. I only remember the feeling of being passed over again and again. No one wants a child like that, marked as difficult, moody, withdrawn. That is what the paperwork said. I read it when I was 16 and already tired of pretending I was okay. I had fights. I had rage. I had nights when I punched walls because no one ever explained why I was not enough. And then I turned 18 and the state said goodbye. They gave me a key to a temporary housing unit in a rundown part of Atlanta and told me to make the best of it. No family. No job. Just a cot, some chipped white paint on the walls, and the lingering echo of a system that had no space for me anymore. But I survived. More than that, I rose. At 23, I owned 3 beauty salons across Georgia and Tennessee, a supply warehouse that served the entire Southeast with my own branded line of products, and I had just closed on a deal to open a 4th flagship store in downtown Nashville. I drove a black Audi Q8 with tan leather interior. I lived in a renovated loft in Buckhead with exposed brick, quartz counters, and floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out at the Atlanta skyline like it owed me something. Because it did. The whole world owed me something for the way I had been thrown out like trash. And I collected that debt in every hour I worked, in every piece of success I carved out for myself. Then it happened. It was a Monday morning. My assistant Mallory knocked on the glass and peeked her head in. She looked unsure, which was rare for her. She said there were guests in the lobby asking to see me. She said they were very insistent. They said they were my parents. My blood went cold. I do not know what I expected. I had thought of them sometimes. I had imagined running into them on the street. I had wondered if they would ever come find me. But I had also pictured myself punching the air out of them. Screaming until the pain made sense. Instead, I stood up, smoothed out the sleeves of my fitted navy blazer, and told Mallory to let them in. They walked in like they belonged there. A man and a woman. Late 40s, maybe early 50s. Worn faces, desperate eyes. They sat down across from me like they were applying for a job. The man had a folder in his hand. He opened it. Inside were DNA papers. They said my name. Clorinda Reese. They said 97% match. They said they had made a mistake. I did not speak for a long time. I watched them fidget. I saw the way they looked around my office like they were trying to measure its worth. The woman's eyes lingered on my Rolex. The man's on the framed article from Forbes Women Rising behind me. I asked what they wanted. They said they had fallen on hard times. Their home had been foreclosed. The economy had hit them hard. They had no place to stay. They said I could help. That I should help. Because I was their daughter. That was the moment I snapped. I stood up and walked to the glass wall of my office where the city sprawled below me in miles of glittering possibility. I pointed at the paper they had laid on my desk. 97%. That was the number that ruined my life. That was the number they could not accept. That was the number that made them dump me into a system where no one wants you unless you are cute or quiet or easily fixed. And I was none of those things. I was rage. I was abandonment turned into ambition. I was what happened when you throw away a person and they survive. I turned back to them. I opened my wallet. I pulled out a $1 bill and laid it on the table like it was poisoned. I told them they were welcome to it, because that was exactly how much they were worth to me. $1. Not even a full 1% of my attention. Not even close to the daughter they had discarded over a technicality. I told them to take it and get out. But they did not. That is when it turned. The woman's voice hardened. The man narrowed his eyes. They started using words like respect and responsibility. They told me I would not be here without them. They started acting like parents, after 23 years of silence. They thought biology gave them a key back into my life. They thought my success was theirs to claim. That blood, even diluted by 3%, was enough to erase the orphanage, the hunger, the rejections, the fists clenched in the dark. It was not. I pressed the button on my desk. Security came in, 2 of my staff who had seen me build this business brick by brick. They asked no questions. They escorted those strangers out of my office like they were any other trespassers. Because that is all they were. Trespassers. Not parents. Not family. Not even people I could recognize by heart or memory. And as the elevator doors closed behind them, I felt something I had never felt before. Freedom. Not the freedom of success. Not the freedom of proving the world wrong. But the freedom of finally closing a chapter one had never chosen to begin. I owed them nothing. They gave me nothing. Not even their names when I was a baby. Only papers. Only percentages. So I gave them one back. 1%? No. Not even that. They are nothing to me now. Not by blood. Not by bond. Not even by a fraction of a fraction. And that is how I chased away the people who thought they were my parents, people I did not consider mine by even 1%. Update 1. Clorinda, 23 years old, thought the worst part was already behind me the moment security escorted those strangers out of my office, but I was painfully wrong. I learned that less than 3 weeks later on an ordinary Wednesday morning, when my attorney's number lit up my phone while I was reviewing inventory reports for 2 new salon locations. I almost ignored the call because my schedule was packed, but something in my chest tightened before I even answered, the same instinct that had kept me alive all those years when I had nothing else. The email arrived before the call even ended. A lawsuit. Thick. Formal. Cold. Their names printed across the top as plaintiffs. My name listed as defendant. The claim made my vision blur. They were suing me for half of my business, half of everything I had built with blood, exhaustion, and sheer stubborn will. They alleged biological parentage, emotional damages, and entitlement based on shared DNA. They wanted ownership. They wanted control. They wanted to rewrite history and walk into my life as if abandonment could be erased with paperwork and greed. I remember staring at the screen, my hands shaking so badly I had to sit down on the edge of my desk. Half my business. The salons. The brand. The warehouse. The contracts I had signed at 2 in the morning with caffeine burning my throat. The nights I slept in my car outside the first salon because I could not afford both rent and security. The years no one showed up for me, no one asked if I was okay, no one cared whether I ate or froze or broke. And now, suddenly, these people believed they were entitled to the rewards of a life they had actively destroyed before it even started. The shock turned into something sharper. Something colder. Rage, yes, but also clarity. They did not want reconciliation. They did not want forgiveness. They wanted profit. The court process was brutal, invasive, and exhausting. They dug into my past, tried to frame my orphanage records as proof of instability, tried to suggest that I would not have succeeded without genetic advantages passed down from them. They twisted biology into a weapon, claiming that blood outweighed abandonment. Every filing felt like a slap. Every hearing felt like standing naked in front of people who had no idea what it costs to survive when the world decides you are disposable. But facts do not care about entitlement. My legal team dismantled their case piece by piece. The DNA discrepancy that they themselves used as justification for abandonment became the cornerstone of my defense. Their own signatures were on the documents surrendering parental rights. Their absence was documented. Their lack of financial, emotional, or physical support was undeniable. The court saw exactly what they were trying to do. They saw opportunists attempting to hijack a success story they had nothing to do with. When the ruling came down in my favor, the relief did not feel like joy. It felt like vindication mixed with something unfinished. I had won. Legally, completely, undeniably. They walked away with nothing. No ownership. No compensation. No recognition. But as I stood outside the courthouse steps, the city noise roaring around me, I realized winning was not enough. They had dared to touch what I built. They had dared to reach into my life again, not with remorse, not with love, but with a lawsuit. They had tried to steal from the same girl they once threw away over 3%. And that crossed a line I could not ignore. The anger that settled into my bones was not loud. It was heavy. It was deliberate. It was the kind of anger that does not explode immediately but plans, calculates, and waits. I thought about the years I starved while they slept in a house they no longer owned. I thought about the nights I cried alone while they lived their lives pretending I did not exist. And I thought about the audacity it took for them to walk into a courtroom and claim they deserved half of my empire. They did not just disrespect me. They insulted every version of me that survived when no one cared. I left the courthouse with my jaw clenched, my nails biting into my palms, my mind already moving far beyond the verdict. Because while the court had ended the lawsuit, it had not ended my fury. And as I walked back to my car, heels clicking against concrete, one truth burned brighter than anything else. They dared to encroach on what I built myself, and I was nowhere near finished with them. Update 2. Clorinda, 23 years old, was not a woman driven by emotion anymore. The lawsuit had burned that out of me. What was left was something sharper, a surgical sense of retribution honed by years of abandonment, humiliation, and betrayal. They had walked into my life as beggars dressed in the robes of martyrs, claiming blood, claiming mistake, claiming entitlement. And when they failed to rob me through the court system, they vanished again, like cowards licking their wounds. But I knew they would come back. People like that always do. All it takes is one taste of wealth to turn them into vultures, circling for scraps they think they deserve. They came back 6 weeks after the trial. I was not surprised. I was prepared. This time, their approach was different. Softer. They claimed to want a second chance. They spoke of rebuilding what we had never had. They said they wanted to make up for the years we lost, that they were ashamed of what they did, that they had changed. I watched them pretend to be humble, to be human, to be something more than two opportunists in wrinkled clothes rehearsing lines they thought I wanted to hear. And I smiled. I told them I forgave them. I said I wanted to try again, to give them the family connection they were so desperate to restore. I suggested we start fresh. I said they looked tired, broken, overwhelmed, and I offered them something they could never refuse, a vacation. An all-expenses-paid retreat to rest, relax, and reconnect. I said it would be a surprise destination. I even gave them spa brochures and booked a luxury car to pick them up at my office. They wept. They called me their daughter. They said they never imagined I had such a kind heart. They had no idea what I was really doing. I booked the flights under fake names, through a travel agency that specialized in discreet relocation packages. I chose the destination myself, a remote, drought-stricken region in rural northern Africa where foreign tourists stood out like neon signs and luxury was a word no one knew. A place where English was useless, where food was scarce, and where shelter required effort. A place that had no return flights unless you had thousands of dollars and the ability to navigate multiple embassies. A place where they would wake up every day sweating under a sun that did not forgive the unprepared. A place they could survive, but only if they learned how to beg, barter, and break just like I had. The plane left Atlanta at dawn. They boarded smiling, holding hands, dressed in clothes I had shipped to their motel the week before. They still believed in the illusion. That was the sweetest part. I had handed them fake boarding passes wrapped in envelopes with my company's logo and had written a card thanking them for trying to repair our relationship. They cried as they read it. I watched from a distance, behind tinted glass, as they walked into the terminal like it was the gateway to salvation. It was not. By the time they landed, the reality hit. There was no resort. No transportation waiting. No tour guide. Only dry air, chaos, and a crowd that had never heard their names. They had no cell service, no local currency, and no understanding of what to do next. I watched the first panicked voicemail come in 2 days later through a satellite relay number they managed to reach. I deleted it without listening. They called again and again. I never picked up. They emailed. I blocked them. Their social media posts became increasingly desperate, requests for help, for donations, for tickets home. I forwarded them to a private folder labeled Poetic Justice. Back in Atlanta, I went on with my life. I expanded the warehouse. I closed on a 5th salon. I signed a contract with a major beauty distributor. I took a trip to Miami and celebrated with champagne while they stood barefoot in a foreign village wondering how it had all gone so wrong. But it had not gone wrong. It had gone exactly the way it needed to. I was not ashamed. I did not feel guilt. They had sent me into a system where survival was not guaranteed, where I ate government peanut butter and cried under moldy ceilings, where no one came to tuck me in or rescue me when I was sick. They had walked away without a second thought. Now it was their turn. To suffer. To scavenge. To survive. I did not send them to die. I sent them to remember what it feels like to be forgotten. It was not revenge. It was balance. They were too arrogant to believe that I could hurt them the way they had hurt me. They underestimated the scars they left, the lessons they taught. And when they finally realized the truth, when they understood that their plane was a one-way ticket to humiliation, to fear, to the edge of desperation, I knew my work was complete. I took full revenge on the people who once discarded me like I was a misprinted receipt. They were not victims. They were architects of their own downfall. And as far as I was concerned, they could learn to build a new life from the dirt, just like I did. Except this time, no one was coming to save them. Update 3. Clorinda, 23 years old, never heard from them again after that last voicemail. I cannot even tell you the exact moment they disappeared from the map, and the truth is, I do not care. There is a strange kind of peace that settles over you when something toxic vanishes without your help. No police reports. No investigators. No airport returns. Just a silence so complete, it becomes its own kind of music. The last trace of them was a broken voicemail filled with wind and panic and fragmented sentences in a language I did not recognize. Then nothing. Some people might have spiraled into guilt or doubt, waiting for karma to call them back. But not me. I did not refresh news pages. I did not check foreign consulate sites. I did not contact embassies. I did not Google any headlines from rural regions of Africa. The same way they had tossed me away into a system and moved on with their lives, I buried them in my memory and moved forward. They could be anywhere. Lost. Stranded. Reborn. Gone. It did not matter. For me, their exit from my life was final. No funeral. No mourning. No candles on an altar. Just the cold, absolute ending of a relationship that had never existed. They were not my parents. They were two people who tried to cash in on a daughter they had once considered unworthy of their name. And when that failed, they paid the only price I ever asked of them, disappearance. They called it a vacation. At least, that is what I let them believe. A surprise trip. A healing journey. A way to reconnect and rest. I handed them the illusion with manicured fingers and a practiced smile, and they boarded that plane so proud of themselves for fooling me into forgiveness. They were so blinded by greed they never stopped to think they were being outplayed. And when they landed on red earth under a ruthless sun with no itinerary, no return ticket, no luxury awaiting them, I hope for one brief second they remembered the sound of a baby crying in an orphanage they never visited again. What happened after that is not my story to tell. I kept living. That is what mattered. I opened 2 more stores, one in Charlotte, one in Miami. My custom skincare line became a minor sensation after a celebrity posted about it unprompted, and my DMs were filled with investors trying to buy their way into a piece of my empire. I did not say yes to anyone. Every storefront I opened was funded by me. Every lease, every contractor, every brushstroke on the walls of each new salon bore my signature. Because I built it. Not with family. Not with help. Not with love. With fire. With cold, calculated grit. With the knowledge that no one was coming to save me. And now I did not owe anyone anything. I moved into a new penthouse in Nashville. A full-floor unit with steel-framed windows, a fireplace imported from Italy, and a balcony so wide it wrapped around the entire building. I hosted events, met with brand consultants, hired personal security, and bought my first piece of real art, a surrealist painting of a girl walking alone through a burning field. I hung it above my bed. People thought it was a metaphor for ambition. It was not. It was a memorial to the life I survived. The people who once called themselves my parents became ghosts. Not tragic ghosts. Not mourned or missed. Just background static that faded until even their names felt fictional. I never checked to see if they made it out. I never opened the locked file with the travel details or called the agency to confirm whether they'd made contact again. As far as I was concerned, that was their chapter to write, far away, unreachable, irrelevant. Sometimes people ask me if I ever think about my childhood. I do. But not with tears or longing. I think about the way I had to learn to smile at social workers I did not trust, how I stitched my own clothes from thrifted scraps, how I learned to read court documents before I knew how to drive. I think about sleeping with a knife under my mattress when the temporary housing complex got too loud, and how I built a dream business by turning every ounce of rage into fuel. I do not regret it. I do not wish it had been different. I would not have created this life if I had been born into comfort. What they gave me, intentionally or not, was the gift of forced strength. And for that, I do not owe them gratitude. I owe them nothing at all. They could still be alive. They could be working in a market, shoveling dirt, learning how to beg in a language that offers no pity. They could have died in the dust. They could have found another plane, another victim, another country. But that story ended the moment they walked into my life asking for money and walked out into exile dressed as a favor. I never chased them. I never tracked them. I never wondered how they were doing. They are gone. And I am still here. Thriving. Whole. Unapologetic. Unforgiving. They came into my life thinking they could take what I built. They left without a name, without a dollar, without even the dignity of a return flight. For me, that was the end. No reconciliation. No reunion. No fragile attempt at healing. Just me, standing at the top of everything I built, never looking back.